All right, here we go with the second part of our lecture. So if you remember, we left off basically at the end of the Mexican-American War, and so we have this question of slavery. So I went ahead and titled this section the Road to the Civil War, because we're going to see a couple of compromises here that involve both land grabs and slavery that will eventually lead to the Civil War, which is basically where we're going. So today you can see we'll talk about many other topics here. Popular sovereignty, free soil party, California, which we've talked about already. We'll talk about the Compromise of 1850. That's sort of where we're going with the California problem. The Gadsden Purchase, and Kansas, Nebraska. So we left off with the Mexican-American War, and as we talked about just a few seconds ago, this made slavery and the new territories basically the main political issue with the United States. And they basically, politicians wanted no piece of this. They basically wanted to try to delay this as much as possible. They tried to, as I said, sort of to kick it down the road. So they really don't do much at all. They just sort of ignore the problem that's generated by slavery. So we're sort of in the road to the Civil War here. We're going to keep on kicking this can down the road, so to speak, until this monster rears its ugly head in 1861. But right now in 1848 and through 1850, we're still trying to avoid the crisis. We're letting other people deal with this. But that doesn't mean that the fringes weren't already going at it. So you have the northern sort of abolitionists. They're getting ready, and what we call the fire eaters are sort of continuing to agitate. So we do have sort of the sides building. They're just sort of at the fringes of society. Most people are happy at this point to sort of let the problem slide for now. So, of course, as we mentioned, California is the key to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and the key basically to the Compromise of 1850. Because they are going to want admittance as a state very quickly, and that's going to be influenced by the California Gold Rush. So in 1848, they find gold in Northern California, and this is not only going to provide a rush of people, but a rush of sort of people who like to make quick money. So these aren't exactly reputable people that are coming in. So you're going to have a huge number of sort of lawless men thinking about sort of like the Lawless West and all those sort of like Dirty Harry movies, or not Dirty Harry, the Clint Eastwood movies, but the spaghetti westerns, that's what I'm thinking of. Sort of that sort of idea here with the lawless men coming in to California. And that's going to be key because essentially California is going to need help, because they're going to have a huge number of people coming in for the gold rush, and they're not going to be able to basically police this influx of folks. So they're going to need a little bit of extra help. So essentially, California is going to have to call in for the reserves, and of course that's the United States. So their government is, as I said, overwhelmed. You have the outburst of crime, you have a lot of murder, a lot of robbery, etc. And so they're basically going to apply for admission to the United States, and that's just fine with the United States, remember, because that's the whole reason why really they fought the Mexican-American Wars, because Mexico would not sell California to us, so we went to war. So we have the situation here where California needs some help fast, and the United States is okay to provide it, so they provide their state constitution quickly. But their state constitution outlaws slavery, because I believe at the time slavery is maybe outlawed in Mexico. So they outlaw slavery, and they sort of want to come in. Now, this, of course, is going to expose the raw nerve, so to speak, the slavery issue. We already have a pretty big question of what's going to go on, and we have a balance. Remember, we've been trying to delicately maintain that balance. When Missouri comes in, Maine comes in to offset the slave state. When Texas comes in, Oregon has to come in very quickly to offset. So they're very careful to make sure that the balance of slave state, free state is maintained in the United States legislature. But who's coming in with California? There's no one quite developed enough at this time to come in with California. They're the only state ready, or the only territory ready for statehood. So there's no other option here. There's no like pairing to go along with California. So the South, of course, is going to very strongly oppose this measure, and this is going to lead the 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 country to a bit of a crisis, because we have this balance, this 15-15 balance, and California is going to essentially upset that balance, right? And so the South again is going to be very fearful of this, and we have Utah and New Mexico coming down the pipeline too. But like I said, formal Mexican state territories, pretty sure they're anti-slavery, that they have it banned, so they want to come in as free states too. So all of a sudden you have the potential of not only one but three new states coming in. So the South essentially is going to be very against this. So there's going to have to be some sort of compromise then that would allow California to join the Union. And the compromise, I guess, is presented in itself because the South is seeking to solve the problem of the runaway slaves. So we're going to talk about slavery here soon. That might be my lecture for tomorrow that I'll leave for you guys about slavery. And we'll get to that problem very soon. But there's a runaway slave problem, essentially, and the South is looking for a little bit of help with that. So the South is demanding basically for a stricter fugitive slave law. Now there is one in effect, but essentially the North ignores it, so it's not really effective. So they're basically wanting a new fugitive slave law that will help them with this runaway slave problem. Now, problem is really not that big of a problem in the long run. It's not that many slaves who are actually escaping. And there are going to be, this is sort of where we get the idea of the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman becomes the great conductor on the railroad, but that's the path that they would take north, oftentimes leading to Rochester, New York was I think the end line. That was a free town where a lot of the people on the Underground Railroad were going to. But the South, is going to be angered by this. They're going to be angered by the fact that people in the North aren't really able to help them. They're ignoring the law. So they're going to want a little bit more teeth, a stronger fugitive slave law. So this is basically the compromise that we get. Because in 1850 we have, those fringes part of society, those fire eaters, they're talking about secession already, just because of California. So you can sort of see the momentum building. We're only 11 years out now from the Civil War, and any sort of issue here has the potential to cause this Civil War. And the 1850 here, we're going to need some sort of compromise in order to prevent that from happening. So Henry Clay, who is the great compromiser, he sort of urged compromise, and he had come up with many other sort of compromises in the past, but he's going to be a one who is really going to help for compromise. So you get John C. Calhoun, Henry Clay, and Daniel Webster. They're all going to be helping for compromise, but Clay is going to be the really big guy, and essentially we get the Compromise of 1850. Now, it's a good thing, for this compromise that President Taylor dies. He dies right before this compromise is able to come to fruition, because Taylor is pro-South. He's anti-compromise, and he probably would have vetoed this bill. But Fillmore takes over. He signs the compromise. So we get the Compromise of 1850, which goes to this tradition of sort of kicking the can down the line. We don't want to deal with this issue of slavery. So the North, it's hard not to say that they win the compromise, because California comes in, they become a free state, and New Mexico and Utah get to pick based on popular sovereignty. We'll talk about that here in a second. But it's very unlikely either would really vote for slavery, and remember, they want to be free states. But the big part that the South is going to get is down here at the bottom with the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850. With the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850, this is going to be a tougher law, one that the Northerners would, quote-unquote, have to follow, so it's supposed to help with this fugitive slave problem. And it sort of backfires on them a little bit, though, because Northern opinion, this is really going to help push a lot of people on the fence, who are on the fence, off the fence, and towards the abolitionist side. So this is going to sort of encourage, if you will, abolitionist sentiment in the North with this tougher sort of fugitive slave law. But that's the Compromise of 1850, is that California comes in, they're a free state. We sort of introduce this idea of popular sovereignty, which is going to become pretty important here in a second with Kansas, Nebraska, and we end up with a tougher fugitive slave law, which really helps influence some abolitionists in the North. So here's sort of a nice visual for you guys. You see the free territory, California in 1850 coming in as free, and then that pinkish there with Utah and the New Mexico territories those essentially are left open to this idea of popular sovereignty. Now, we're so close to the Civil War, and like I said, we're kicking the can down the road. So we have to sort of always keep that in the back of our mind. How is this going to affect the war? And this is going to be crucial, really. This is going to be massively crucial for the North with the Civil War, because this is going to give them the advantage. Now they have one more, basically, state, one more than the South. So they have one more free soil, if you will, state, and that's going to give them more money, more population. It's going to give them a little bit more time to sort of build up their forces and ready to go and ready to fight. So this is going to also help their moral strength. Like I said, the fugitive slave law and hatred that's going to build towards that is going to help sort of galvanize the North in their abolitionist ways. Right now in 1850, the abolitionist sort of sentiment doesn't quite have a stranglehold yet, and most Northerners might not even support the use of force because of that. So we're going to need time for this to sort of simmer, if you will, a little bit, so the North is really ready to take on this issue of slavery, and which will eventually result in the Civil War. All right, so real quick, we got about 4 minutes left here in this video. Quick election of 52. Democrats put up Franklin Pierce. He served in the Mexican-American War. The Whigs put up good old, what was his, Fuss and Feathers, or whatever his name is, Winfield Scott. Well, you can see the results here. A lot of red, not a lot of pink. Pierce is going to come in as the leader. He takes a lot of, most of the South, most of the North, does pretty well. So Pierce takes over as president. Before we get quickly to the Kansas-Nebraska problem, we'll get to the Gadsden Purchase. So this is influenced by the railroad, and we'll see that again in Kansas-Nebraska, how this sort of lust for money and the lust for the railroads are going to help inspire some of these slavery problems. But slavery really is an issue here with the Gadsden Purchase, where we're going to sort of purchase leftover territory from the Mexican-American War for $10 million. It's called the Gadsden Purchase because it was negotiated by a guy named Gadsden. So essentially here, this map will explain it a little better. So that blue little bit is part that we bought, so it sort of fixes our current border with Mexico here at the Gadsden Purchase. And you can see that railroad going from LA to Houston is going to run through this area, which is now Tucson. And so we purchased this area, parts of Texas with El Paso there in the corner there, and all the way through the bottom part of the United States, so they can complete this sort of semi-transcontinental railroad. Now, this is going to inspire the North, too, to get to an issue with Kansas-Nebraska, but we'll get there in a second. So here's the idea of popular sovereignty. Of course, going back to gov, popular sovereignty, popular meaning people, sovereignty meaning power, so power to the people. So when applied to slavery, popular sovereignty essentially means that the power of the people to choose from themselves. So the territories will vote, and they get to decide if they want to be a free state or a slave state. And so when popular sovereignty is applied to Utah and Arizona, those areas are probably going to be free state. They'll probably vote that way. Or Utah and New Mexico, excuse me. But now we're going to think about the idea of adding popular sovereignty to Kansas and Nebraska, because Stephen Douglas is sort of a railroad tycoon. Not really, but he's invested a lot in Chicago, and he wants a railroad similar to the railroad that we just saw running through Texas and New Mexico. And I've sort of run out of time, so I'll tell you here about the Kansas-Nebraska Act here in the next video.